The way I describe it is it's a bit like having a slow puncture.
Yeah.
We knew that the air was sort of running out and we were thinking, how far can we get? I mean, I think firstly, I never wanted to be a poster boy for anything or a bellwether for the industry. If I could have avoided everything that has happened, I would have done. I wanted to write the last chapter of the book of Zigzag, and I didn't want the last chapter to say, oh, they had a good 25 years and then they went under. There were a couple of messages that, I've got to be honest, brought me to tears. And even now saying that, it makes me a bit emotional. It was a bit like being at your own funeral and hearing the eulogies. And it gave me an opportunity to say to people, oh, I'm not dead.
Welcome to TellyCast, the podcast for everyone in the TV and digital content business. I'm Justin Crosby, and this week I'm joined by somebody who's been at the heart of the UK indie scene for over 2 decades, Danny Fenton, CEO and founder of Zig Zag Productions. We're going to be talking about the challenges Danny and his team have faced over the past 12 months and how they've come out the other side. Danny, great to have you back on the show. Welcome to TellyCast. I think it's about your 4th or 5th appearance.
Yeah, I can't believe the last one was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
A lot's happened in that time, but it's great to be back.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, you're very welcome. And also, I think it's great to be able to talk about openly about the challenges that you've had, because I think it's symptomatic of the way that the UK TV industry has gone and the wider international industry as well. Let's start with that hard bit. Zigzag went into insolvency in April last year, I think it was.
Yeah, Zig Zag Productions Limited, which was one of the companies within the group, went into insolvency, but it was the main production arm of the company. And the way I describe it is it's a bit like having a slow puncture.
Yeah.
We knew that the air was sort of running out and we were thinking, how far can we get? And the nature of our business is it's a bit like being a junkie, that you're looking for your next hit to keep going. Hit as in terms of a hit show, but a hit as in terms of money into the company. And, for 25 years, we very successfully sort of kept our habit going. But post-pandemic, there was this sort of weird period where I think going into the pandemic, everybody thought that the way the industry was heading, if it was a seesaw, that the seesaw would be linear, money would go down and streaming money would go up. But because of the pandemic and because neither broadcasters or streamers could spend any money, they stockpiled their money. And then we came out of the pandemic, we had this U shape on the seesaw, and everyone's like, oh, these are the glory days of television, because it was a short-lived period. And of course, post-pandemic, and then we had, a war in Europe, we had a war in the Middle East, strike in America, post-effects of Brexit. All these things combined created a perfect storm, and both sides of the seesaw went down at the same time.
You're by far from the only company that this has happened to. I think there's probably a lot that have had challenges, but we've not necessarily read about. But you're probably one of the highest profile. I mean, maybe, I know that we've spoken before, you talked about, maybe perhaps being the poster boy for the UK indie, challenges. But, I mean, it's brilliant to see you coming out of that. And we'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later. But talking about a company going into insolvency and a production company, we talk about that as a mechanical business process and a logistical business process that they have to go through. But I don't think anybody really talks about the personal and the emotional side and how that affects you and your team.
Yeah.
Can you talk about what was going through your mind when you first realised that things were in trouble, and just highlight what were the key factors that led to the company being in trouble?
I mean, I think firstly, I never wanted to be a poster boy for anything, or a bellwether for the industry. And if I could have avoided everything that has happened, I would have done.
Yeah.
And for us, I was talking before about having the fix and the hit to keep you going. We came out of the pandemic and we had 4.7 million of work that was sort of lined up that was due to come in, which would have seen us through that period and have kept the wolves from the door. But those projects keep getting delayed. They were co-productions that one party had the money, the other didn't. And, by this time, having built up a company over 25 years, you aspire to get bigger. That's the thing that people do. And we got to a stage where we had, 10 heads of department, 40 full-time staff, 100 freelancers, expensive offices, 11 edit suites. We were, we had to turn over, 3.5 million to break even. So, that gives you a sense of why we needed the 4.7 to come in, because you need to sort of, stoke the fires, as it were. And people used to say to me all the time up to that point, when we'd started as 3 people and built up over the years, they'd say to me, God, how do you sleep at night when you've got all these mouths to feed? And I used to say, sort of fairly, glibly, I suppose, I would say, well, I don't really think about that, because if I did, I wouldn't sleep at night. But actually, when you get to a point where the money isn't coming in, and you've got these people whose mortgages are dependent on it, and suppliers, who's dependent on it, you get to a point, and you're saying about how does it affect you personally? I mean, firstly, you don't sleep because it's naturally, you worry. And then you stop taking money yourself. You stop taking a salary. So you think, people always think independent producers are rich people, but it's a two-way street. When the money isn't coming in, where does the money come from? Especially when you're 100%, true indie company. There's no parent company to go and ask for money for, and then you start putting your own money in. So I'm mixing my metaphors with slow punctures, but it's like bailing out of a rowboat that's got a hole in it, and so you're not in denial, but you're hopeful that you can get through this. But as you're taking on board more water, you're realizing that you can't bail out quick enough, and so. People say, well, you were very clever. I mean, it wasn't really about being clever. We got advice early from advisors about what to do in that situation, because I'd never been in that situation previously.
It was the one moment that you can remember that, maybe one of these commissions didn't come through or these productions come through. Was there one particular moment that you can remember that it was like, okay, that's maybe it, or, this is now going to force me in a direction that I don't want to go in, but it's not something I can avoid.
I think I've always been a cup half full kind of person, so I always was optimistic that we would find a way out of the situation. Matt Graff, who's our MD and my business partner, he's a bit more sanguine and he's more of a cup half empty guy, but that's quite a good compliment to me. And he basically said to me, look, we're going to struggle to make payroll. We're going to struggle to service our debts. And technically speaking, we were insolvent, but practically speaking, well, actually probably the other way around. Technically speaking, we weren't insolvent, but practically speaking, we were, in the sense that a couple of years prior to this, we'd got our library valued, and the library valuation, which was quite a unique thing for an independent company to do, but because we've been around 25 years, we thought, look, this is an asset, we should get valued. That asset sat on our balance sheet, and it meant that we weren't insolvent.
On paper.
On paper. We didn't have the cash, but we weren't insolvent on paper. And so actually, as I remember it, at the point, and this, as I say, this was a process that started 18 months ago, so it was only really like a year ago when it came into the public domain, but it was something that we'd already been thinking about before then. And I think it's where Matt said to me, look, I don't think we're going to be able to keep going. We just don't have the funds.
His was the kind of the voice of the voice of reality, rather than you were being a little bit too optimistic, maybe, or. Well,
I mean, you say too optimistic. I mean, as I say, I'm naturally a positive person. I don't think we'd have got through the previous 25 years without a sense of optimism. But yeah, maybe he was a reality check at that point, that, at some point in life, you need someone to tell you, if you keep doing the same thing over and over again, what do they say, that, thing.
It's a sign of insanity.
Sign
right?
of insanity is when you keep making the same mistake over and over again.
Yeah.
And so that was a reality check. And then, you know, once you bring in advisors, once you bring insolvency practitioners in, it's sort of you've opened the door in your own mind to that scenario, and then it does become quite clinical, methodical, and I actually remember the insolvency practitioner saying to me, "You know why you're called a limited company? It's because you have limited liabilities." And you know, how many times have people, you know, gone insolvent, and you've been affected over the years? And I said, yeah, actually, you know, quite a few times. And look, we felt bad that there were people left out of pocket. I mean, thankfully, it was very few people and not for a lot of money. And the main people who were impacted were the bank and HMRC. But you do feel responsible for anybody losing out. But also you remind yourself of what the experiences you've had over the years, the work you've brought to the community as a whole. And it's something, you know, it's hard to justify to yourself, but when you're in this situation, you have to find a way through it. And, you know, you asked me what the personal impact was on me, and I think I kept it quite controlled until the point when a journalist from Deadline Hollywood, Jake Cantor, rang up and said, "Oh, I've been looking on Companies House and it looks like you're filing for insolvency for voluntary insolvency for Zig Zag Productions." And at this time, I mean, there was probably one or two companies going under a week. So it was, I think journalists were becoming acutely aware that, you know, this was happening within the production community, not just the freelance community that was in crisis, but the production community. And at that point, it was a situation where you either meet it head on or you let it sort of wash you away. And I think that if I could have, I would have sort of started Zigzag 2.0 and hoped that, like an 80s DJ, you could fade out Zigzag 1.0 and fade in Zigzag 2.0. But I think because we'd been around a long time, because I'm somewhat of a character stroke loudmouth, that it was impossible to go unnoticed. You couldn't tiptoe through that minefield. Yeah. And so, you know, we tried to address the story as best we could. I think Jake, who broke the story, he did a fair story, but I think even for a journalist, it was difficult to understand the business complexities of the fact that it was one company within a group of companies, that the rights were in different parts of the company, that Zigzag could carry on as a brand without Zig Zag Productions carrying on. And so when that story came out, as you say, about a year ago, I've got to be honest, that was the lowest point, because up until then I'd sort of been able to pretend that things were okay. But then when it's in the public domain, and what I hadn't realised is that when one publication breaks it, every other publication pretty much copies that story. They don't really verify the facts. So and at that point, I got hundreds and hundreds of messages from well wishers. You don't tend to hear from unwell wishers, but the volume of messages from a lot of ex-colleagues, people who'd started their careers at Zigzag, who'd met their partners at Zigzag, had babies with their partners from Zigzag, who'd gone on to do great things. And
well, there must be hundreds of people over the years, over those 25 years, because lots of people have gone on to hold really, influential roles in the industry, and a lot of people are, have come from being receptionists through to senior distribution executives, and so you've touched a lot of people's lives.
I take that as a sort of a positive byproduct of Zigzag. I think there were a couple of messages which are simply like, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have had the career I've had. That, I've got to be honest, brought me to tears. And even now saying that, it makes me a bit emotional, because because it has been my life's work. That's the truth of it. 25 years of running your own company, and it felt a bit like a bereavement at the time, and it was hard. And I've mentioned this to people, and I'm not ashamed to say it. I turned to the film and TV charity, who I didn't even really know anything about previously, and they're the most amazing organisation. And I got counselling through them, I got financial support through them. I got advice how to deal with debt through them, and I would say to anybody who's going through a situation similar to what I went through that they are an amazing organisation, and they're there to support you, anybody in the film and TV industry. And so you only realise when you hit bottom, and when the story came out, that's when I hit bottom. But when you hit bottom, there's only one way to go from there, and it's up. And I felt that from that day forwards, I moved in an upward direction. Bearing in mind, I was playing the biggest game of snakes and ladders I'd ever played, and I'd come down the biggest snake I'd ever been down. And look, externally, I probably appeared to be quite a confident person, and I lost a lot of self-belief in that in that moment, because you would, and we had to make 7 people redundant, some of whom have been with us 15, 20 years. That they were like family. They are like family. I'm pleased to say that we've been able to rehire a lot of people as freelancers. So nearly everybody who worked with us has come back in a freelance capacity. But the whole model of what Zigzag has changed, and what Zigzag is now is a totally different organisation. And I've always said that I've never been somebody actually who's embraced change. Like, if I could do the same thing every day of my life, like Groundhog Day, I would do that. But when change is foisted upon you, you have no choice to embrace it. And so now I've seen everything that's happened in the last year as being an opportunity rather than like a negative.
Yeah. Well, just finally touching on that piece, just going back to what you said earlier about all the messages that you had. TV industry, and the traditional TV industry, in the sense that that there's been unchanged for the last 30, 40 years. Did you find it supportive in general? Because it's a cutthroat business, and people don't tend to think too much about that, I don't think, but it really is pretty cutthroat. And do you generally tend to feel people were being supportive? You talked about the film and TV charity being there as an organisation for you, and obviously provided a great deal of value. But yeah, it can be cutthroat. So I just wondered if
that's actually quite a tough question, because I think that people who used to work for me, with the majority of people, other producers, other production companies, who I think were thinking that there but for the grace of God go I, and saw what had happened to me and to Zigzag and gone, well, if it can happen to him and them, it can happen to any of us. They were incredibly supportive. I've got to be honest, I kind of hoped there'd be more broadcasters that would have reached out, and some did, and there were some there were some really, really like decent people, but I don't know, I feel like almost that because of the broadcast industry being in crisis, there's almost a bit of survivor guilt from the broadcasters, in terms of they know that their lack of commissioning is having this impact on the production community, and I think it's hard for them to sort of acknowledge that publicly to producers.
Well, yeah, I mean, I have to say that I've had a couple of chats with producers this week, and it's not just about the lack of commission, but also it's I've heard instances of really, really bad acting by broadcasters who've cancelled projects, and then arguing about what the compensation for that is, and I mean, okay, it's business, it's tax write-offs, it's all sorts of different things that that when you're dealing with multinational corporations, and it is a business, I realize that. But
the other thing I noticed was also that I made a conscious decision 6 months ago to go to as many events as possible to show that we were sort of still present, because I thought it was important.
Yeah.
And that was a weird experience, because every event I went to, people would look at me like I was an apparition, and people would say, "I'm so sorry to hear of your passing," or "You had a great run," and it was a bit like being at your own funeral, and hearing the eulogies, and it gave me an opportunity to say to people, "I'm not dead. I'm not dead." I mean, even this week I was at an event.
I've been reborn.
I've been reborn. Well, I made the joke, just think of me like Bobby Ewing in Dallas. I went in the shower and came back a couple of seasons later. But so it was really important to get the messaging out there to people, because I think with the narrative of the industry, that you've got certain companies that have done very well during this period, like I would call like the Champions League companies. There's 4 or 5 companies that have just grown and grown.
Yeah.
But the majority of the other companies have struggled, and the ones in the relegation zone have gone under.
Yeah.
So the narrative has really always been, if you go down, you're never coming back. And so what I really wanted to do is say, I'm not gone. I'm coming back. A bit like Leeds.
Yeah.
And I wanted to make that clear to people. And the other thing was that people would say, and quite often actually broadcasters would say, well, why don't you just retire? I mean, you must have made enough money to retire. And I'd say, well, firstly, I'd like to think I'm too young to retire. I've still got something in me. Secondly, I haven't made the sort of money that a lot of broadcasters think we're all Stephen Lambert, but we're not. And thirdly, and probably the most important thing for me is, and I think you'll understand why I'm saying this, I wanted to write the last chapter of the book of Zigzag, and I didn't want the last chapter to say, oh, they had a good 25 years and then they went under. So I do believe that our best shows are still ahead of us. Now, I might be deluded in saying that, but it's what inspires me every day to keep going, that I can still write the last chapter of the story and it can end on a happy ending.
Yeah. Well, let's start talking about that and Zigzag 2.0. But before we do, just one final thing about learnings, I think, because the state of the industry right now, there will doubtless be, tens, if not maybe hundreds of indies out there experiencing, similar issues to that you did. What advice would you give them? It sounded like you talked about getting insolvency experience and advisors in early. Is that what it is? Is it about dealing with things as early as you possibly can?
Well, definitely dealing with things as early as you can. Being honest with yourself about your situation. If you've got assets, get your assets valued. Work out what you've actually got that's of any value, whether it's IP, whether it's physical assets, edit suites or whatever else, and rationalise to the extent that we did over the prior 18-month period, when people's contracts came to an end, we started to let people go if their contracts were up. We shrunk down the development team. I speak to a lot of producers now. They either don't have a development team or they have somebody on a part-time basis. But just look at your overheads, and if you can't meet your overheads, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
So I think yes, getting internal advice, getting external advice, and having an honest conversation with yourself about where you're at. And actually, look, it applies to medium-sized companies like ourselves. It applies to so-called super indies where you're seeing consolidation of less labels being shrunk down. It applies to smaller startup companies. In many ways, the smaller startup companies are in the best position because a lot of those companies, there's a company called Phoenix in Hampshire who I'm friends with, and they have virtual offices and they've never had an office, and they don't have any full-time staff. And that's the way to start a business. Start as a lean, mean fighting machine, which is where we've ended up by default.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to talk about. So let's talk about the new Zigzag. how are you designing the company for today's and tomorrow's TV industry or content industry? Who knows how long TV is going to be around as a concept as we have known it for the last 30, 40 years. But how are you equipping yourself in terms of that design? Obviously, keeping overheads down, right?
Yeah.
But what else? How else are you approaching the industry? How are you approaching it differently now than you did 5 years ago?
Well, firstly, keeping the overheads down. Matt and I are the only full-time members of staff now.
Right.
So everyone else is freelance and comes out of a budget of a program.
Yeah.
It's sort of been universally recognised that the middle of the market has gone. That sort of 100 to 200,000 8 o'clock features type shows gone. So where we focused our efforts has been on the sort of the two ends of the market. So we're doing a lot more digital short and mid-form content, which is something we'd never really done before because we could never make it work on our overheads, but now we can. Yeah. So we've done this 8-minute mid-form series for Hearst, true crime series called Now Listen to This. We're going to do another one of those for them in the history space. We've started to do a lot more brand-funded content. So I'd say 50% of our slate now is either fully funded by brands or 50% funded by brands. And even the streamers now, bar Netflix, and I wouldn't be surprised if Netflix end up doing it as well. If you come up with a brand who will bring half the money, they'll bring the other half. So everybody's looking now for ways of, cost saving. Yeah. The brands, spot advertising doesn't work for them in the way that it used to. So I want to say stumbled into, but it obviously it was a strategy. But we started to make digital ads for brands as well.
Right. Okay.
So we found there's a niche.
That's really interesting, I think, because there are so many appropriate skills that you can transfer into advertising and shooting ads, and also the type of ads now that cut through. Because all of that money is turning to digital, into turns to digital advertising, and the type of content is not your 30-second spot. It's different, it can be lots of different types of branded.
There are a lot of brands that I would say are legacy brands or family-owned businesses that can't afford the 7-figure budgets to go through a big advertising agency, but have got 100, 200 grand where they want content, digital content, either to put on their own social platforms or to put out virally. And since the turn of the year, we've done 4 of those ads. Yeah. So it's a whole new avenue for us, and one I'm keen to explore more, because I think TV companies can do that, provide that service in a way that ad agencies probably can't come down to that price level and deliver that quality. And then, we just recently did for TNT Sport and Discovery a brand-funded series that was fully funded by an energy brand around sustainability in sport called Playing for Our Future. We're talking more about doing more brand-funded stuff like that. And then at the other end of the spectrum, we're doing premium factual and premium reality. We've got a Nelson Mandela feature doc that is been directed by Antoine Fouquet, who's a Hollywood director who directed Training Days with Denzel Washington and The Equalizer, and that is fully privately funded through Lawton Entertainment, and then we'll go to the festivals and we'll be sold to the highest bidder from the streamers.
That's interesting. So do you see more private equity coming into content?
I do see more private equity and private investment coming into content as an investment in IP. I think the other thing that has been a godsend to us has been our library. So, one of the things we had to do when we made Zig Zag Productions insolvent is I personally acquired the library at market rate, independently valued, and that has been a godsend in the sense that in the age of fast channels and YouTube channels and the like, and also now the AI tech for training world, which is a whole new area, owning your library, owning IP, owning your rushes, even rushes from 25 years ago, has a new value that didn't exist.
That's really
previously.
interesting. So I mean, the old business adage about creating products that make money while you sleep.
Yeah.
I mean, that's AVOD essentially.
Yeah.
So that's obviously working well for you. But yeah, the training data is really interesting. And are you finding that that lucrative? And also, without talking about in detail about numbers, but how do you value what is the value when it comes to AI training data? Is it per hour or is it per series?
So
or how does that work?
it's a mini gold rush, but what I know about the gold rush is the people who made most of the money were the people selling the pickaxes and the buckets and the lodgings. So everybody's chasing this so-called gold rush. There are quite a few companies out there offering this service. In fact, somebody came up to me and said, it was at Real Screen, and they said, I'm the number one AI tech for training provider. And I said, oh, that's interesting because I've met 5 other companies who claim they're the number one as well. We've done our due diligence and we've gone with the company that offered us upfront minimum guarantee, which I felt was proof that they were serious.
Yeah.
Now, there's a real range. So people are saying you get $6 a minute. Potentially, the numbers could be massive.
So how do you choose what content to include in that library? Or do you just say, stick it all in? I mean, is it as many hours as possible if they're basing it on a per hour?
Yeah, they're really interested. They're really interested in rushes even more than finished programming.
Really?
But once you've put it in the cloud and once they've analysed it, they don't want the same take of something 10 times. So, there's no point them doing tech for training on a person walking up to camera 10 times saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Some companies are being cautious about image rights and, if there's a celebrity in there, although it's not for broadcast purposes, it is tech for training and you don't know what the AI usage is going to be in the future. So there is a sort of a boiling down process where you provide them with everything and they'll go through it and they'll tell you how much of it is actually of use to them. And different tech companies want different types of content, different genres of content. Some want sport, some want technology, some want engineering, etc. So we're quite early in the process. From what I know of the market, nobody has done massive deals yet, but everyone's sort of primed for it. It might be like the gold rush. It might be, a flash in the pan.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to suggest is that, once you've sold your library once, is that kind of it? Or can you do multiple
It's non-exclusive. It's non-exclusive.
It's non-exclusive. So you could do the same deal.
Yeah, and apparently there are 70 AI tech companies who all want this content.
Right, okay.
So, let's talk again about it in the future and we'll see whether it came to fruition. But the point I was trying to make is that the library has given us value. So although we are Zigzag 2.0, which is in effect like a startup, we're a caravan, but we're towing behind us this library that has
the benefit of the legacy that
has
you
a value.
Yeah.
And then the other area, as you know, I'm not a cunning linguist, but I've always seen the international value of the industry. And I think at a time like now where the 2 key markets for us over the last 25 years have always been our home market, UK, and the US, where we had a presence for 15, 20 years. If the UK market's bad, the US market's even worse. And so when your 2 key markets are in flux, where do you go? And we spent a lot of time in China and we tried the Middle East. And for us right now, the 2 key places are South Africa, which I think is a massively underexploited opportunity for our industry because the cost of production are low. It's English speaking. They've got really good skill set. And we are planning to shoot a new show there in July. And Korea. And Korea just feels right now because of music, film, gaming, sport, music, the whole gamut. Korea just is a hot market. And so we've got a couple of projects we're co-developing in Korea and one that will be filmed in September in the UK, but with a Korean partner.
Okay. And again, that's benefiting from your 25 years in the business because you were always one of the first and foremost producers that was making the effort to go to what we're seeing probably 10 years ago is really far-flung left field markets, and going on, like packed tours and
well, because I always thought the value of UK producers was higher internationally than it was in the UK because the competition was so stiff in this country, and having been on the board of Pact for 8 years, I saw there were 500 plus companies in this small island, and actually we're fighting over the crumbs, and even more so now, the crumbs that fall off the table. Whereas as a British producer to go to South Africa or Korea or China, they value British expertise.
Yeah. So finally, Danny, let's talk about where you think the industry's going right now, and maybe a couple of predictions. You've obviously already intimated that brand funding is going to be really key. Any other sort of predictions? Where do you see the business going in 12 months and 5 years from now?
I think there's going to be more opportunity to direct to consumer. Another aspect of the library is, we launched a channel with Little Dot called Toughest, where they took all of our male skewed factual from the 90s and noughties, the Danny Dyer stuff, the Vinnie Jones stuff, the Donald McIntyre stuff, and they've launched a channel with a million subscribers, and that again, it brings in money, a little bit of money, but it brings in money while we're asleep. So I think producers who've got catalogue can be thinking about launching channels. I think that, as I said, the brands are the new broadcasters, and whereas in the past broadcasters were a bit more sniffy about brands, now if you turn up with a brand, you sort of go to the front of the queue, and also for the streamers as well. I think that, look, content's not going to die. It's just going to pop up in lots of different places. And I've always said, if there's a screen on a plane or in a taxi or in a urinal, they all need content. And just last week, somebody rang me up who I'd met in 2017. This is the value of planting the seed of meeting lots of people. And they said, I've launched a bingo platform and we need some content to play in between the bingo games. Do you have any library that we could acquire? And I just thought, this is just mad. Like there's just so many different places that need content. So as long as your antennae are up and you don't lock yourself into, I only make programs for this broadcaster, then I think there is still the potential to make a living.
Yeah. Expand your horizons a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay. Danny, brilliant. Thank you so much for that chat. Now, we've got a story of the week, hero of the week, and get in the bin to talk about before we finish. So what's your story of the week?
I think the industry story of the week has to be Alex Mahon leaving Channel 4. That's 8 years, I think she's been there. I think it's been a really challenging time at Channel 4. I think she's admitted it's been a really challenging time. Make an analogy with my football team, it's a bit like being manager of Tottenham. It's the impossible job. I'd be interested to know, and this is not me being judgmental, I'd be interested to know how history judges her and her era. I think, she's probably had the toughest chief executive period of anybody at Channel 4.
Maybe anybody in the TV industry, because you think about all the other broadcasters, the change in this and the challenges that she's had with fighting off privatization twice, ad market cratering, digital transformation, and then all the other stuff that comes with being a broadcaster with, Me Too and a lot of the, challenges they've had there.
I think she's remained incredibly positive throughout. I think she's definitely a force of energy. And I remember, I think it was like her first week at Channel 4, and I cheekily emailed her and said, it'd be great to have a meeting with you. And you don't really expect people who've just started a job as chief exec to respond. And she said, well, let me know when you're next coming in. She responded like within 5 minutes. And I then cheekily said, well, funny enough, I'm on my way to Channel 4 now, which I was for a meeting. And she said, well, pop upstairs after your meeting. And I met her like within 2 hours of sending the email. And I was really impressed by that. I mean, I wish her all the well in in her new job, all the best in her new job. I wouldn't want to take that job on from her. I think whoever takes that job on, it will be like taking over from Ange Postecoglou next season.
Yeah, bit of a challenge. Big, tough act to follow
Very
as
tough.
well.
Yeah.
How about your hero of the week, Danny?
As you notice, I keep making football analogies, so it's hard for me not to think football. And because I was coming to see you, I was thinking somebody would be a hero that would connect us. And so, obviously, the Israeli international Manor Solomon has played a crucial role in getting Leeds promoted. Unfortunately, he didn't play enough for Tottenham before he went to Leeds, but I like to think that was a gift from Tottenham to Leeds. And on that note, I did actually bring you a gift, which is a Manor Solomon Israel.
Look at this
Israel shirt.
Oh,
so
brilliant.
We can do a signing photo.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Signing photo afterwards.
Danny, look at that. Fantastic. Brilliant.
So you can wear that to your next Leeds game. It's even almost Leeds coloured. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, he's been brilliant and an amazing addition. And I hope we get to keep him. That's the other thing.
I think you probably will.
Yeah. And who or what are you telling to get in the bin, Danny?
Well, there were two things I was thinking of. I mean, one which is a sort of, I suppose it is a football thing, but it's also a TV thing, which is VAR. But I mean, I think VAR is the thing that keeps being annoying. And actually, for you, having followed Leeds in the Championship, you don't have VAR. And when you come back up next year, you'll get to realise how annoying it can be. You can't celebrate any goals and, everything's
delayed
reaction and lines are drawn. And I was actually quite shocked to discover until the new automated VAR system that in Stockley Park, they were actually drawing the lines by hand. So it was actually, depending on how straight a line the official could draw. The industry in the bin, I think, would be the thought that Banijay might buy ITV. And as you know, I probably have no love for Banijay, having had a brief dalliance with them in the past. I mean, beyond whether they would pass the fit and proper persons test, I think that the idea that our biggest commercial broadcaster would be owned by a foreign owned production company is quite a scary thought.
Are they interested in the broadcaster, though?
They're interested in the broadcast and the studios.
Okay.
Yeah, apparently, allegedly.
But the value of the broadcaster is zero, apparently, been written down to zero, and it's all about Banijay rights and catalogue and
the value
distribution.
The value of Endemol Shine was supposed to be less than zero, but, it's about taking on debt and it's about, how you work your way through that, which is something we've talked about earlier.
Yeah. Danny, brilliant. Thank you for coming on. Really
Thanks for having me.
Having you on the show. Your honesty is really refreshing, and I think it will resonate with a lot of people.
Thank you.
I wish you all the very best for Zigzag 2.0.
Cheers.
And all the best for next season.
Thank you.
Well, that's about it for another week's show. I hope you enjoyed it. TellyCast was produced by Spirit Studios and recorded in London. We'll be back next week with another show. Until then, stay safe.